It was a sunny afternoon on December 5, 1945, when 5 U.S. Navy Avenger torpedo bombers took off from Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station in Florida. The mission seemed routine, a training exercise over the Atlantic, involving navigation and instrument practice for the squadron. Known as Flight 19, the squadron was led by Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, a seasoned pilot with years of experience. Each plane carried 2 crew members, and the men were well-trained, confident in their skills. The Atlantic skies were calm, the weather ideal. For these aviators, it should have been a standard afternoon of practice. But from the moment they reached the ocean, something went wrong. Within an hour of takeoff, Lieutenant Taylor reported confusion over his position. He radioed to base, stating that his compass was malfunctioning. He and the other pilots could not determine their exact location. What followed was a series of increasingly alarming communications. Taylor admitted he might have been off course, flying over unfamiliar waters. Attempts to guide the squadron back to the Florida coast were met with frustration. The plane's navigation instruments were either unreliable or misunderstood, leaving the pilots disoriented over the endless Atlantic. On the ground, air traffic controllers and naval officers tracked the squadron's radios, noting the growing tension. Taylor's voice conveyed urgency, but not panic. He was determined to bring his men home safely. Yet despite his experience, Flight 19 seemed to drift further from its intended route. As the hours passed, the last known positions of the planes moved farther east into the area now known as the Bermuda Triangle, a region infamous for strange disappearances and unexplained phenomena. The squadron's transmissions became increasingly fragmented. Observers on the ground heard reports of low fuel, worsening weather, and radio static that cut off vital communication. Meanwhile, rescue efforts began almost immediately. Other naval aircraft were launched to search the waters for the missing squadron. One PBM Mariner flying boat, sent to find Flight 19, would also vanish without a trace. The Atlantic became an ominous expanse, swallowing both trainees and rescuers. Flight 19's disappearance was sudden, shocking, and unprecedented. 5 experienced planes, multiple trained pilots, and hundreds of miles of open ocean. Yet no wreckage was ever found. The U.S. Navy conducted extensive searches over days, deploying ships and aircraft to cover thousands of square miles. They examined ocean currents, drift patterns, and nearby islands, but nothing surfaced. For families, comrades, and military officials, the loss was incomprehensible. The men were skilled, the planes reliable, and the mission routine. Yet in the calm waters of the western Atlantic, Flight 19 simply disappeared, leaving behind one of the most enduring mysteries in aviation history. The events of that day would spark decades of speculation, conspiracy theories, and fascination with what would later be called the Bermuda Triangle. Scholars, skeptics, and enthusiasts would ask the same questions repeatedly. Were the pilots victims of navigational error? Did mechanical failures play a role? Or had something else, something beyond comprehension, claimed Flight 19? This was not just a tragedy. It was the beginning of a legend, a story of human skill and experience meeting the unknowable vastness of the sea. And it would captivate the world for generations to come. As the final radio transmissions from Flight 19 faded into static, a sense of urgency swept across the U.S. Navy. The Atlantic was calm, the weather still clear, but time was now the enemy. Officers quickly mobilized every available asset to locate the missing squadron. Ships were dispatched, planes took to the skies, and sailors and airmen braced for a search unlike any they had faced before. The scale of the operation was enormous. Multiple naval vessels scoured the Atlantic coastline near Florida, while aircraft flew grid patterns over hundreds of square miles. The Navy sought both survivors and wreckage, hoping that even a small clue could reveal the fate of the 5 missing Avengers. But the ocean remained uncooperative. Endless waves reflected the sun, yet concealed what lay beneath. Among the search teams was a PBM Mariner flying boat, a larger aircraft equipped with long-range capability, sent specifically to locate the missing squadron. As the crew scanned the horizon, reports would later confirm that the flying boat too encountered trouble. Communications faltered, and suddenly the mariner itself vanished without a trace, leaving only fragments of oil on the water. The search for Flight 19 had become even more urgent, and yet the ocean had claimed another plane. Back on land, officers pieced together the last known movements of the squadron. Lieutenant Taylor's reports indicated a growing disorientation. The squadron had been flying eastward into open waters, but navigational readings suggested they might have been circling. Confused by compass errors and the uniform appearance of the vast sea below. Each turn they made seemed logical to the pilots in the moment, yet from the ground, their path was erratic and unpredictable. The Navy immediately expanded the search area. Ships were sent farther into the Atlantic, and aircraft scoured nearby islands, hoping for signs of survivors or debris. Yet despite tireless efforts, no definitive evidence was found. Floating wreckage, parachutes, or life rafts, anything that might indicate where the planes had gone down, were absent. The disappearance sparked debates and concern at the highest levels of the military. Experienced aviators questioned how 5 planes could vanish without warning in good weather. Some suggested pilot error, but others acknowledged that even the most skilled men could be overwhelmed by navigational challenges over the endless, featureless ocean. As the days passed, public fascination began to grow. Newspapers around the country reported on the missing squadron, emphasizing the strange circumstances and the growing legend of the Bermuda Triangle, the area of the Atlantic where Flight 19 disappeared. Civilians, journalists, and even amateur investigators speculated on causes ranging from mechanical failure to the paranormal. Despite the lack of physical evidence, the Navy remained methodical. They examined the ocean currents, potential wreckage drift patterns, and consulted with pilots and navigational experts. Every possible theory was weighed, from catastrophic failure to navigational mistakes. Yet the mystery deepened with each passing day. By the end of the week, the official search was called off with no trace of Flight 19 or the Mariner flying boat. The disappearance had become one of the most confounding incidents in U.S. military history, a cautionary tale about the dangers of over the ocean, even under seemingly perfect conditions. Flight 19's vanishing was not merely a loss of planes and lives, it became a story of unanswered questions, a puzzle that challenged conventional understanding of navigation, weather, and the unpredictable power of the sea. For the families of the lost, closure was impossible. For the world, fascination and speculation had only just begun. And from that moment onward, the Bermuda Triangle, the mysterious expanse where the planes vanished, became forever linked to the legend of Flight 19. With Flight 19 lost and the Mariner flying boat missing, the world was left grappling with questions. How could 5 well-trained pilots vanish in broad daylight over calm seas without a trace? What made the Bermuda Triangle so notorious, and could it really be responsible for the disappearance of skilled aviators? The first and most straightforward theory was navigational error. Lieutenant Taylor himself had admitted confusion over his position, and the vast Atlantic offered few landmarks to correct mistakes. At the time, navigational tools relied heavily on compass readings and dead reckoning, estimating position based on speed, heading, and time. Over the endless ocean, even a small error could compound into a significant deviation, leaving the squadron hundreds of miles off course. Compounding this possibility were environmental factors. Some experts suggested that sudden atmospheric changes could have played a role. Reports noted that the weather, while calm initially, could have included strong air currents, dense cloud cover, or subtle magnetic anomalies that interfered with compasses. In open ocean, pilots can easily become disoriented, the horizon and sky merging into a featureless expanse. For Flight 19, this may have been a deadly combination of fatigue, confusion, and the illusion of steady course. Then there was the theory of mechanical failure. While all the Avengers were considered reliable, wartime production pressures sometimes resulted in minor faults or overlooked defects. A malfunction in a single plane might have caused it to turn erratically, forcing the rest of the squadron to follow, unaware that the first plane had strayed from its intended course. However, even this explanation struggles to account for the complete disappearance of 5 aircraft and an additional Mariner rescue plane. Some turn to paranormal explanations, giving rise to the enduring mythology of the Bermuda Triangle. The region between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico had been linked to multiple disappearances, both maritime and aerial. Proponents of the supernatural theory suggest unusual magnetic fields, sudden waterspouts, or even vortex-like phenomena that could explain the sudden vanishing of vessels. While most scientists dismiss these claims, the coincidence of Flight 19's disappearance and the Mariner's loss amplified the mystery. Another theory involves pilot error compounded by panic. Taylor's experience did not prevent human limitations. Radio transcripts reveal his growing frustration and attempts to guide his squadron back on course. Experts note that even skilled pilots can make critical mistakes under stress. A miscalculation combined with fatigue and the pressure of navigating an increasingly confusing situation could have led the planes to fly further into the open Atlantic. Finally, some theorists propose a combination of factors: navigational errors, subtle mechanical problems, and environmental anomalies, creating a scenario where Flight 19 spiraled into the unknown. Without wreckage, these theories remain speculative, yet they highlight the complex interplay of human and environmental factors over the ocean. Despite decades of investigation and public fascination, no single theory has been confirmed. The Navy's official explanation emphasizes navigational disorientation as the most likely cause, but admits that the ultimate fate of Flight 19 remains unknown. The disappearance, instead of diminishing in mystery over time, has only grown more enigmatic. Flight 19's story illustrates the limits of human knowledge and technology. Even with trained pilots, reliable aircraft, and coordinated search efforts, the vastness of the Atlantic and the unpredictability of nature can create unsolvable situations. And it is this combination of skill, preparation, and still unsolved mystery that continues to fascinate people worldwide. The disappearance of Flight 19 was not just an accident. It became a symbol, a reminder that some places on Earth, even in modern times, remain unforgiving, unknowable, and deadly. Almost immediately after Flight 19 went silent, the U.S. Navy launched one of the largest, fastest, and most urgent search and rescue responses in American aviation history. Within minutes, a massive air and sea operation was underway. Carrier-based aircraft, destroyers, search cutters, and rescue planes were scrambled into the fading daylight. The clock was ticking fast. The Atlantic is unforgiving in the dark, and every minute that passed meant fuel was disappearing even faster. One of those rescue aircraft was the PBM-5 Mariner, a massive flying boat built for long-range search operations. It carried 13 crew members, radar systems, emergency medical supplies, and equipment to locate downed planes on the ocean. If anyone could find Flight 19, it was this aircraft. It never came home either. Somewhere over the same Bermuda Triangle waters where Flight 19 had disappeared, the PBM vanished from radar almost instantly after takeoff. Another crew, another machine, gone. Radio operators picked up one brief transmission confirming takeoff and then complete silence. No distress call, no mayday, no coordinates. One moment it existed, the next it didn't. Hours later, a tanker ship reported seeing a huge flash of fire in the sky, far off in the distance, exactly in the region where the Mariner should have been. Naval Command believed the Mariner may have exploded mid-air, possibly due to volatile fuel fumes that Mariners were notoriously known to leak. But again, no wreckage was found. Not a wing, not an oil slick, not a single floating personal item. 13 more men disappeared into the deep. At this point, the Navy now had 6 aircraft and 27 men missing in a few hours. This was not a minor incident anymore. This was a national crisis. In the following days, the search expanded into one of the largest ocean searches ever mounted in peacetime. Over 200,000 square miles were searched. Hundreds of ships, dozens of aircraft, thousands of man-hours. Nothing. The Air Force, the Navy, the Coast Guard all combed the region relentlessly. They interviewed every pilot who flew that day. They dug into logs, engine maintenance reports, weather reports, radar data, wind drift patterns, ocean currents, compass failure probabilities, and still nothing made absolute sense. The geometry, the timing, the radio calls, it didn't mathematically line up like a normal aviation disaster. It was like the Atlantic had swallowed them deliberately. Families were furious. Newspapers exploded with theories. Politicians demanded explanations. The military was pressured to release more data, and the more that was released, the stranger Flight 19 seemed to become. Why couldn't Taylor orient himself when he was one of the most experienced? Why did compasses across multiple aircraft simultaneously malfunction? Why did the rescue plane disappear too, within minutes? Flight 19 very quickly became the moment the Bermuda Triangle became legend. This wasn't fishermen. This wasn't a single small aircraft. This was military aircraft, multiple crews, multiple planes. Highly trained, sober, disciplined professionals. The fact that not a single confirmed piece of wreckage, not one verified fragment, has ever been recovered from any of the 6 aircraft, even with modern sonar mapping decades later. That's what transformed this event from an accident into one of the most haunting mysteries in aviation history. The rescue operation that was launched to save them, instead, deepened the mystery forever. If the ocean can erase 27 trained servicemen in perfect silence, then what else could it erase? For nearly 8 decades, Flight 19 has existed in a strange space between documented fact and something that feels like it shouldn't be possible. Because for every attempt to explain this logically, for every military theory, every retired pilot's analysis, every documentary, every investigative reconstruction, the deeper experts dig, the more it becomes clear. This wasn't just a navigational mistake. It wasn't just poor weather. It wasn't just a training oversight. Something about December 5, 1945 still sits outside the normal rules of probability. And today, there are 4 dominant theories that continue to generate debate worldwide. The first theory is the most grounded. The U.S. Navy claimed it was a simple combination of human error and compass failure. In their final report, they concluded that Taylor believed he was flying over the Florida Keys instead of the Bahamas, meaning he turned north when he should have turned west. The idea is they simply flew until they ran out of fuel, ditching somewhere off the coast of Florida. It is the easiest explanation to accept. The problem? No major debris field. Not then, not now. No large pieces of aircraft discovered. Nothing matching 5 Avengers, not even decades later with modern sonar scanning. The second theory, even darker. Many believe those Avengers ran into a military test zone. The post-war era was filled with new weapon experimentation, many classified to this day. There are journalists and historians who believe Flight 19 intersected with early electromagnetic equipment testing, possibly radar frequency experiments, something that interfered with instrumentation to catastrophic levels. It would explain why both compasses failed simultaneously. But again, that begs the question. If this was the case, why would the government bury it, lest something happened in those waters the Navy never wanted to disclose? The third theory, the cultural heavyweight, is the paranormal phenomenon theory tied to the Bermuda Triangle itself. There are thousands of reports of planes, boats, and radar anomalies in this region dating back over a century. This region has been something humans have feared long before there were satellites and flight data, from disappearing radio signals to catastrophic weather shifts. To magnetism anomalies, the area is considered one of the most mysterious zones on Earth. Some argue this region has a distortion effect, something that bends normal physical rules. Something that makes compasses spin and minds lose orientation. Something geographical or something else entirely. And then there is the fourth theory. The one that feels like conspiracy but won't die because it refuses to stay buried. That Flight 19 never crashed at all. That these pilots, for reasons unknown, were diverted. Landed somewhere, transported, possibly part of covert intelligence. Some people believe Flight 19 is connected to other classified aviation disappearances of the era. Some believe it is connected to MK-level psychological research programs that started shortly after the war. Others think these men were pulled into something larger, something the public was never meant to know. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. When we talk about Flight 19 today, we are talking about a disappearance that should have been impossible to hide. These were not single-engine private aircraft. These were massive military machines. Losing one could be explained. Losing 5 at the same time, in the same region, with the same radio distortions, makes this different, makes this anomaly. Flight 19 is not just unsolved. Flight 19 is a fracture, a crack in our assumption that everything that happens can be categorized and rationalized. And that crack is the exact reason this case has not faded. Because every year that passes, the questions become louder, and the answers become harder to avoid. And after this, many decades, maybe the real question isn't how did Flight 19 vanish? Maybe the real question is, what exactly did Flight 19 run into that night? The moment the Navy realized Flight 19 was not returning, the reaction was immediate. Multiple search aircraft were launched that same night. Ships were redirected. The U.S. Navy activated one of the largest aviation search responses ever attempted up until that moment. They covered the estimated flight path. They extended wider and wider every hour forward. They searched the Bahamas. They searched the Florida coast. They searched open Atlantic waters. Nothing was seen. No oil slicks. No floating debris. No aircraft remains. The Navy expected at least something, but there was nothing. The next morning, the search expanded again. More aircraft, more vessels. By this point, this became national priority scale. The U.S. military was fully aware this was not a normal missing flight scenario. These were 5 Navy TBM Avenger torpedo bombers. They were large. They were heavy. They were not gliders that would vanish like paper. Something from them should have appeared. Thousands of square miles were covered. Still nothing. Day after day, the search kept going until the Navy finally admitted they could not locate Flight 19 anywhere. This was considered extremely rare and unacceptable from a military context. The ocean always gives something back, even in worst-case crashes. There is always something floating, something drifting, some type of trace. Flight 19 left 0 traces. The Navy eventually closed the search. They never recovered any confirmed pieces. They never recovered any bodies. They never recovered any wreckage to identify. The disappearance stayed completely intact. The file was never solved fully. The case was classified as cause unknown. That conclusion changed how the world saw this incident. Because this was not just a training flight gone wrong. This was an event where modern military aviation vanished inside a populated region with immediate response capability. The U.S. Navy placed massive resources into finding answers and still found nothing. This moment is where the mystery fully locked in permanently. The idea that 5 large aircraft could disappear in controlled airspace and not return a single trace became one of the most unusual aviation disappearances in history. Flight 19 now entered the stage where investigators, researchers, historians, and pilots realized that this incident would not be solved simply by time.